Hey everyone, this is not so much a guide as a walkthrough. This event, unfortunately, for a Gear 8 armorer, does end up feeling like it has a lot of restart RNG. Uh, it is just what it is. You're gonna have to deal with it if you want to make it through. You can see here we have both of the feats. They are done. I was able to beat the event 5 times total in my testing over the course of, I don't know, about 8 hours ish, probably, of playing. Maybe more, maybe less. Probably about 8. Yeah, we're gonna go right on in here. So you can see this is what we're running. We have a Relic 6 Django and a Relic 5 Beskar Mandalorian. I will point out that multiple times during this run, I was actually kind of wishing that these relic levels are lower. So if you are working with less, do not stress out about that. Really, it ended up being an issue where we had a few opportunities, a few runs where they got the early hit, and we didn't get below that 60% health mark that the armor is looking for to be able to make an armor piece. So, keep that in mind. Don't feel like you have to be able to match my exact stuff to be able to try this. At the same time, though, don't take it as too good of a news yet, because we are running some very weird, very specific mods that we'll see. We'll get there. Relic 3 on the Mandalorian. Gear 12 on Canderous. No gear pieces whatsoever. Just rocking the Gear 12 plus 0. And then armor is sitting here pretty at Gear 8 with no extra bottlenecks committed. Which is, what we're looking for, right? Okay. So, modding wise, there is kept on changing and evolving over the course of this, and this ended up feeling the best, the most consistent. So for Django, we wanted a mix of potency, but I also found that by the end, I actually was wanting him to be able to dish out some damage. So we have a protection arrow, a crit damage triangle, a potency cross, and a for the most part, I would say stack everyone with protection here if you're choosing between health and protection. So yeah, protection circle here. Speeds also end up, you can see, being a very odd mishmash. We got a 15 next to a 0, next to a 23, next to an 11. The potency, or the protection arrow, might end up being a hard fit. But the overall speed, not too terrible to reach, end up being 274. The speed thresholds for this are actually fairly forgiving. There's a lot of wiggle room. This is just kind of the speeds I ended up clocking at with the mods I had. We're not necessarily having to race out to beat too much here, but more specifically, what we are setting against is our Canderous. This is a full Ferrari set Canderous. This is speed potency with just as much speed jammed in as you can get. You'll notice that even with this heavy extra potency focus, he is only at 59%. This is why this is so annoying to have to build. His base potency, if your Canderous is like mine, is 3%. It's not great. It's decidedly terrible. That is one of the lowest in the games, I would have to imagine, especially for a debuff committed character. So, yeah. Again, this speed, Bosk's first turn most of the time isn't going to be damaging. For the runs that we're looking for, it's not damaging. So don't feel stressed if you can't hit this out of the gate. This is just there because we want Canderous to pop off as much as possible, and so you want him to go fast and to debuff plenty. I don't know. I have him health and protection. I wouldn't really overthink this too much. Gear 12, he's not really taking much of a hit against this team anyway. You'll see most of the time he just gets blown up. But yeah, just get that speed potency set, potency cross, and just made the dude go fast. So going from there, with Canderous as sort of the pace car, we have Mandalorian, which this is also a bit of specialized modding, I would say. Kind of turned a corner on this the moment that I realized that we can just set his crit chance over to about 75%. I ended up locking him in with 73. Maybe not necessarily the crit chance that I was hoping for. Adds a little bit of extra RNG. If you can get that to 75, by all means. In fact, I probably could if I just tweaked with mods more, but you get you spend enough time at the remod screen, you kind of get a little bit brain dead by the end of the day. Actually, in fact, I know. Well, okay, we're not going to do that right now. This is what I was using when I won on stream. 4 protection primaries, speed defense sets with 273 speed, and aiming for that 75% crit chance mark if you can get it. Again, kind of just trying to sneak in those extra protection arrows and getting away with it. Not necessarily the craziest speed here. You know, if you have a somewhat equal defense set, you can just jam that in, toss in an extra speed set somewhere down here, probably on the circle. You can see not exactly the most competitive speeds on a lot of these slots, 15, 14, 0. A 25 and a 20 to kind of counter ballast, but most of these sets are 13, 14, 15, 6, right? So for the most part, I would expect this to average out to be a not too punishing build to set up. Mostly just trying to stretch a little bit to find that protection arrow, if you can. I've won without it, but the protection arrow was nice for a little bit of extra consistency. Moving right along, we also have the armor here. There are 2 methods, 2 techniques that you can build her around. If you're going for an armor opener, which I found not to actually be that good, then the number that you can clock around is ideally about 225. That will make sure that you go after their Grief Karga. So, you know, you fish for a run where Grief gets somebody low but doesn't kill armor, which is extremely rare. And also where your Beskar Mandalorian can reduce their Bosk's turn meter with the Frenzy. Is possible. I did get a winning run with it, but I would not suggest it. Instead, what I end up doing is just giving her high speed. You know, I go with a health and protection stack just because she's gear 8. What you can do if you do want to set up a armorer run is Bosk will target the character with the lowest health and protection at that given point in time. So we're doing this health and protection stack because if someone else takes a really hard hit from a Mandalorian turn, then you can, instead of equalizing them with Beskar Mando, you can just let them go, sacrifice them. Especially if it's like a Django where he just loses Bounty Hunter's Resolve, your armor will stay alive, and that can get you your 3rd armor piece more safely. So, worth keeping in mind. But yeah, we're generally just looking for health stack, protection stack. Gear rate, obviously you're not getting a whole lot here, even with a fully committed set. We're about 40k total, but just anything that we can help, because at least Bosk 100% does, and I get the feeling that Grief Karga also looks for the squishiest character available, and so we're trying to game against that where possible. And, you know, being gear 8, we don't have the full speed setup. It's just a little bit rough to try to get her faster, or too fast, so sticking with this. And last but not least, we also have Mandalorian Beskar armor. Now, towards the end of this, I did start to appreciate that his whistling birds actually could open up some opportunities, to the point where any extra gear or relic levels that you could get on him will help. This is sort of a late game whistling bird coming in with the damage over time stacks, and actually being able to pick off a Django here and there or something. But for the most part, fairly simple modding. My offense sets are, for the most part, terrible, so we have a broken set in the middle here, just trying to grab a 16 speed offense where I can. You see, these offense mods are not remarkable. I guess the defense is kind of nice here, but yeah. Don't take this as specialized. I would be using offense here if I could. I just don't have them. But yeah, you know, kind of a nice arrow. And then just extra speed on the diamond. Mostly just aiming to hit this speed mark. A little bit high, but again, probably looking at about an 18 or so average in between them all. Somewhere around that mark. So, moving on into gameplay. We have a series of events that we're looking for here. We are going to be restart fishing. Fortunately, it doesn't take that much time. Unfortunately, we are going to have to do it. Right off the bat here, we are looking for Bosk to taunt. If he happens to throw down a massive sensitive armor, that will be a restart. We open up with the Canderous AoE here, just trying to spread out that offense down, as well as this is just the most turn meter to him possible. It also primes everyone with debuffs so that once we have Django going in a few turns, he will be able to start working on contract immediately. With the flamethrower, I usually try to aim it towards whoever we're planning on disintegrating first. This changed a lot just because it was hard to figure out who was in most need of being disintegrated. We will effectively be decreasing the damage over time, damage that he takes, and we are going to be building up a heck of a lot of them on them. So we don't want to place them on someone who's going to be taking damage over time damage. So a few things back to back. Call the Mass Assist on whoever, it doesn't really matter. They're going to regenerate it anyway. You could drop it on someone that you're planning to keep hitting. So get those true grit stacks down. With armor, we're going with the Mass Assist here. This is to begin this whole Canderous train. All of the turn meter that he's getting with this is ridiculous. This is why we have the ridiculous speed set on him. And you'll see very, very quickly their Beskar is racking a ton of debuffs over time. So this turn right here is also typically a restart point. We're really at the mercy of what their Mandalorian chooses to do. So in this case, he targeted Django. We barely took enough damage to get armor. It's a 3-stack, but most of the time, their Grief Karga is just going to drop a Mass Assist on her anyway, so sometimes she'll live. I have had a Grief basic her once, and she lived. So that is a situation where I got the 3rd armor piece out on the 2nd turn, and was able to win off of that. For the most part, I would not consider that to be realistic. You see that we're up at 20 now we're up at 25. This is counter chance that is going to help us here in a moment. Yeah, up to 31 by the time that they're about to AoE. We are looking for counterattacks. We are looking for clan loyalty counterattacks where everyone is going to spam as many counters as possible. This is where a lot of the restart RNG can come in. So the clan loyalty for us right now is 31. Everyone on this team has 31% chance to counter and 50% chance to call someone else to assist. So you'll see here, we drop another AoE. It's just the best turn meter for our Canderous. Could be a call to drop a basic on Beskar instead if we're just trying to load him up with basics. I like this extra redundancy with the offense down to make sure it's still out on everyone. And we'll see the payoffs of that here in a moment. You'll see right off the bat, Django does Flamethrower. And we are off to the races. This is pretty good RNG. No two ways about it. This is fantastic RNG. This is an extreme high roll. You don't need to see this much, but specifically what you want to see, for the most part, are Bounty Hunter counterattacks. This is progress towards your payout. Or, alternatively, it's nice to see Canderous getting some action as well. We didn't get any Canderous there, so we didn't get any extra damage over times. But the Mass Assist gives him all the turn meter anyway, so we're just taking an immediate Canderous turn right after. Taking another basic. You'll see Beskar is getting completely stacked on. Talking through some of the decision making at this point. This is what I would call a pretty stable looking run. Make no mistake, in about 2 seconds here. When you see Grief is about to take a turn, that means that armor is about to die. That just is what it is. So you could look at the situation and think, oh, you know, maybe she has a shot. We have that triple Beskar ingot. Maybe we could possibly get there. Don't even dream. If Grief happens to basic armor there, then yes, you get to keep it. That's extremely rare. I don't think it's really worth playing for. Kind of just discussing who we should target next. Kind of removing true grit from people who will stay alive. Yep. So there they both go. That's extremely normal. A little bit surprised that Boba didn't actually do AoE there. That is actually what he normally does, so I would actually call that somewhat bad RNG. This is... Normally, you get an extra chance to counterattack off of all of that from Boba doing his ability block rocket. The ability block rocket is also actually kind of bad for us because the ability block can just stop us from using Disintegrate. So you can see we got our payout pretty much immediately. Also, a nice thing about this run is Django getting blasted at the start and then going into his free 2-turn, now 1-turn damage immediately is going to buy us some time. You see they do have a Mandalorian about to go, and because Django cannot be hit, that also means that Mandalorian will not provide his team turn meter. All very useful stuff. because we're dealing with Bosk lead, he has a lot more protection. So we do kind of want to juice his numbers a little bit, try to drop some damage on him if we can. Plus, specifically, everyone else is going to be regenerating it anyway, so. So this was a specific judgment call. I don't actually remember which I went with. Because my Mandalorian is, yes, right now we're 3 versus 5, and we have a disintegrate, but the 3 versus 4 doesn't get much easier. The moment that they get contract on you, you just get wiped. It's terrible. So this is where the offense build on Beskar Mandalorian with the Whistling Birds can start to come in. Actually pretty clutch. So we see here, we have a Mandalorian who is ready to disintegrate. Yes, and so there is the choice. We do go for the disintegrate on Boba. Jango is completely terror, but we will show in a minute here why Jango is workable. See that Bosk has just lost a horrific amount of his remaining health and protection. It's a pretty nice chunk. That's what Canderous is there for. The fast Canderous is doing some good work. I think we should just reapply burn, especially because we can see that OG Mando on their team doesn't have the burn, so he's giving himself turn meter. Would be good to just reapply the burn so that we have something to work with. We know that Bosk is already kind of on a death sentence, so I aim the flamethrower at him. Given the max health down, it is kind of, if he does heal the DOTs, that's kind of healing him a bit, but otherwise, for the most part, it looks like he's going before Grief could possibly heal him, so we're happy with that choice. And we have a choice between, do we want to go for Jango or Mando? And the answer is almost always going to be Jango. Jango is just horrific, can just absolutely one-shot your team if you let him. Because we know that Bosk isn't getting cleansed off here, definitely go ahead and spread it out on someone else. So, you see, a respectable amount of damage, and with those 15 debuffs, we do end up going first. I was actually hoping that he would cycle it off of himself naturally, but our Mandalorian does end up taking a turn, so we can just finish him off ourselves. Which actually ends up working really nicely here in a second. As you'll see, he opts to take the burn, and we get to counter him to his end. So this is the last stage of the fight, and do not get cocky here. It is a lot harder than it seems. Grief is ridiculously powerful with these. I mean, you can see he's given up pretty much every damage dealing buff in the game to himself and OG Mando, and it's rough. So we have a few things we're looking for. So, you know, with OG or Beskar Mando, we have the opportunity to give out damage immunity and also a longer lasting tenacity up. This is going to determine who we're hitting with what when. So we have, I believe I drop it on Mandalorian here. Yes, we drop it on Mandalorian here. So the rule of thumb that I follow is if you have damage immunity, I hit Mandalorian because his counterattacks don't do anything. If you have tenacity, then we are going over and hitting Grief. And if you don't have either, then you probably just hit Grief because you don't want to give them turn meter. The one thing that was a bit rough, maybe a little bit greedy, very nearly backfired. You can see the damage is extremely swift. So we take the Mandalorian counterattack. Doesn't do anything. I take the yellow missile here. It does catch both of them. Maybe would have preferred... Oh, I even targeted a Mando. I guess for the healing immunity, but it's ambitious, to say the least. Maybe, you know, could have hit the stagger, but as you can see, Retribution ends up being swift and a bit painful. It's not great. Ideally, safer gameplay there might have been to have just gone for a basic on Grief. Grief, don't get me wrong, still does damage, but he's not gonna whop you for 71k, so he takes a basic on our damage immunity. It was very kind of him. And at that point, we had our next disintegrate. So from here, still, I would advise you not to get cocky. I have gotten to this spot, and I have gotten reverse swept by Grief Karga. He still hurts, and with Bosk lead, he is regenerating like crazy, and you, for the most part, are not. So we have a few tools, though, that we can try to work towards to solve that issue. And you can see already, like, one basic and our Django's already feeling it. So this is the main tool, I would say, the main line of defense here, is we have our Whistling Birds, which will apply healing immunity, which ends up being really nice to sort of stop the cycle of regeneration that he has from continuing. You can see, again, he's doing a very respectable job of 1v3ing us, and given an opportunity, he could keep it up if he, still had those buffs. We get a decent Whistling Birds off. He's pretty much done for at this point, and you mop up. Good luck out there. Happy hunting.